Yep, the video will kick on in a second here.
There we go.
All right, we are now live. Can you guys all hear me?
So can
10 by 10.
Fantastic. We will await a minute or two before we start going here.
Hey, Mike, Sean, thanks for having us.
Hello. Great to see everyone joining in. James or Kirk, one of you is having a little bit of static. I'm just going to try turning the audio off to see which one it is. Yeah, so James, that was you. I just turned your audio off. When you want to talk, just turn it back on, if that's okay. So it's on the top left of your screen. So James, you got to turn your video back on, or your audio back on. All right, everyone. We've got 44 people here. We'll get started now, 46. It's awesome to see everyone. First, I want to thank you all for joining us. This is one of our first Smart Firefighting virtual chats, and I'm really excited today to be talking about virtual reality with some of the smartest and brightest minds that I know from around the world. We've got James Mullins from Australia, Ben Hermer from the UK, and Kirk Mckinzie from California, and myself in Chicago. 4 different time zones, and I think a lot of you are coming in from different time zones, which is really exciting. It's my goal here today to talk as little as possible and ask as many questions from some of these different experts, particularly around virtual reality. We're here in this virtual experience largely because COVID-19 is throwing a monkey wrench into a lot of our plans. But I'm excited to be able to host this today and bring you all value to be talking about virtual reality. This is going to be a casual discussion amongst all of us. So I encourage you all to use the chat bar, ask questions. We want you.
Well, it looks like we've lost our host there. Ben, I still see you live. Okay, Kevin,
we're live. Back. Sorry, we might have jumped out for a second, but thank you all again. And I'm going to start off with an introduction to everyone, and we'll get going. So if James, if you want to start, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how that ties into virtual reality.
maybe.
James, did you copy?
All right, but Kirk, we'll get started with you first. I think James is a little pause there.
Okay.
Not sure if people can hear me, but it's great to see so many people from all around the world.
Go. All right, James, if you could do one more time, tell us who you are, where kind of the work you do, and how it ties into virtual reality.
Well, that's a heck of a thing. Kevin, I'll go ahead then.
Okay, please.
So like James, I've been a firefighter for a number of decades and recently retired from active duty. James is still active duty volunteer in Australia. And after about 25 years, I thought we might upgrade the way we do business and educating the public and training firefighters, and got interested in VR as a platform and a number of other technologies, which we've spoken about a little bit before. And gratefully, James and the Flame and Ben at River have both been big teams supporting me at Cosumnes Fire Department and fire departments around the world in the move to VR. And James, are you back with us? We were hoping you'd give us an intro. All right.
Maybe not.
Ben, if you want to go, please.
Indeed. So, yep, I'm Ben Hermer. So I'm the CTO at River. I'm in charge of the sort of technology path that we're taking and the technology that we use and you know, part of the vision of the company. River is a training company for virtual reality. We specialize in photorealistic training, which lends itself well to the public sector a lot of the time. I can just hear James in the background. You there, James?
Hey, how are we going?
Okay, so I'll just finish up and then you can go. Yeah, so we do photorealistic training for emergency services. Our speciality is actually scanning real world environments, and pushing forward the realism and the believability of the scenes, which is ideal for first responders and for defense departments and the military, where you're trying to create the sense of realism that we would find in the real world, but in a virtual and repeatable environment.
Awesome. And hopefully James will join us again. And, one thing that I really wanted to talk about here today is virtual reality in general, but also get very specific, where it seems like we've all heard virtual reality thrown around in a lot of different contexts. And I would love to hear from both of you and James once he gets back on sort of debunking some of these interpretations on how would you describe virtual reality, and what are some of the advantages that you see on how virtual reality can be used in the world of COVID-19? And I'll start with Kirk, if you can.
Perfect. Gotcha.
Yeah, well, thank you. For me, so virtual reality is where the screen is fully covered up. It's not mixed or augmented reality, where we might be a little bit of both. We only see the virtual environment, whether it's an RBG, red, blue, green, visible light camera, like a 360-degree video, which we can view on our phone in a simple cardboard viewer, or more advanced systems. And this has given us an opportunity to, ironically, with COVID, we could be transmitting, and maybe we'll do this next, especially with the help of technologists like Ben and James, is push this out live in 360 video, because we can do that now. And so the whole world has moved into this rapid video chat ingestion. Well, now we can't get together and train the way we used to. So now we have to upgrade the way we're going to do training modules. And in VR, it's fully immersive. We don't see anything else, whether it's computer generated illustrations, 3D models, 360 video, or the like. And James, I want to give James, are you back on the audio there, James?
Certainly am, Kirk.
Back.
Apologies all.
No worries.
You've been worth the wait, James. Tell us how you got into it, would you?
Look, I guess my background in VR is about 25 years, pre having grey hair. I'm a robotics engineer, so for me, VR was about telepresence and being able to control bomb disposal robots and counter ID robots, hostage negotiation platforms and things like that. And I've been a firefighter for about 26 years now too. So this kind of topic really is a combination of my two passions.
Awesome. And so when you were gone, I teed up the question on, in both Ben and James, your kind of layman's term of what is virtual reality, and what are some of the kind of examples of use cases or value-added applications of virtual reality?
Yeah, well, look, I guess, as I said, I started off working in telepresence, so being able to put people in dangerous situations that you don't physically want to be in. And for us, VR is part of an immersive environment, a fully immersive environment. So my research back in my university days was in haptics, which is force feedback and touch. So we had robots that we could remotely put your hand in a glove, effectively remotely grab a landmine from a mile away, squeeze it, feel how hard you're squeezing it, brush sand off it without detonating it, and see it in 3D. And 3D is really important for depth perception. So, the environments are that realistic that we can create these days that people fall over in them. If we put a table in front of you, you will walk around it. We put railway tracks in front of you, you'll step over them. We've had people go to lean on some of the cars in our virtual environments and basically fall over because we're tricking the brain to that level of immersion that people think they're in the environment physically.
I do this all the time. Even now, years and years later, is I'll take the VR controllers that I've just been playing around with for the past 15 minutes, and I'll put them on a virtual table and hear them hit the floor. And even now, it still confuses my brain that much. And I've spent thousands of hours in VR. I think for me, I mean, VR, the pursuit, the interest that I have in this area, I think is the, as James was describing that, it's the tricking of the brain. It's allowing us to experience experientially something that is real to us while we're doing it. You know, to be able to go into a virtual space, a virtual world, a virtual scenario, and see the reality in front of you, and have your brain completely believe that's where you are. And of course, from a training point of view, that's absolutely ideal. It means that we can show people things that normally would be either very difficult or very dangerous for them to see. Or we can do things such as desensitization training. We can show them things that they are likely to see in their role that they're taking on as an emergency responder, or or some other hazardous job, and allow them to experience that slowly, and allow them to come to terms with what they've got to do, and in a safe and repeatable environment. But I think, for me, VR is the encapsulation of where you are. It's about replacing senses that you're using every day in the normal world with a simulation, but trying to get that simulation to feel real, so that you can concentrate on what you're doing within that scenario.
I think there's two ways that we can use virtual reality in this kind of training environment, and that's for the confirmatory training, the bread and butter work that we do, just developing our muscle memory, or there's the 1%ers or the 5%ers, or the jobs that we may or may not see ever in our career. So I think it's important that we cover both aspects of training in virtual environments. And it's surprising, we go to trade shows all around the world, and we get some pretty senior firefighters in our systems over the years that we've been operating, and we give them a fairly intense fire situation, and they want to go to fog, to a fog pattern to protect themselves, and sometimes they'll go the wrong way. So firefighting isn't like riding a bike. You do lose those minor muscle memory skills, and it really is important to continue experiencing these kind of events that, as we're probably seeing less structure fires happen over the years, we're probably seeing different construction of buildings, and Kirk can talk about this, I'm sure, in detail. We're starting to see that people aren't necessarily having the experience in all of these environments that they may have had in generations past. So I guess this is a technology that we're looking to try and add some of that experience back in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from our point of view, so it's funny because James and I are at different processes within the same process, if you like. We concentrate very much on the post fire, whereas James concentrate very much on the fires themselves for a lot of what we're doing. But for us, we can capture smoke patterns. We can allow people to walk into what is pretty toxic environment. A fire has burnt. There's a lot of carcinogenics in the walls, in the smoke, in the air. And we can allow people to do that safely. But the nice thing about it is you can capture it to such a level of detail that, for all intents and purposes, you're in the real environment. You have the smoke patterns, you have the burn patterns, you have all the key indicators that you need in order to carry out an investigation. So that when you do, as we just said, there are less and less fires, which is a good thing. But it also means that, the investigators, when those fires do happen, they don't necessarily will have had the experience of seeing it before. Or if they have, it's because they've set up an environment and set it on fire. But the first person in probably had the best training, and the guy who was 20th and had footprints everywhere probably doesn't. So, I think that's the other thing about VR is it's repeatable. It's reset every single time. It's reset for the next person to come along. And if you get it wrong, you can try again with almost zero cost.
I think that's a great point, Ben, and that's probably one of the first things we tell people is we want people to make mistakes in these environments. That's the safest, best way to make these mistakes. I know myself as a firefighter, if I do something that I probably wouldn't want to do again, I'll lay in bed at night and think, well, I'm learning from that. And we get the same learnings, or we see the same learnings out of firefighters in VR, is that they make a mistake, they see what they've done wrong, they have an after-action review with an instructor, and I'd be pretty positive that they won't make that mistake in the real world.
So it seems like anything that's expensive, dangerous, or a risk to health is a good reason to use VR. So Kirk, coming from you with 30 plus years in the fire service and hearing about some of the pre-fire training and post-fire training, what are some of these use cases or examples that you've seen or even personally done with some of these different VR applications?
Well, to Ben's point, one of the best things might be the pre-exposure to a traumatic event. Right when I started, there were some pretty tough colleagues, and gratefully everybody's tough out there, but gratefully we've come to a place where we talk about the challenges of what we see. So important. We're a greater risk to ourselves than the occupation sometimes. And being able to go into a fire in advance of reality or a traumatic EMS event. This is a great place, I think, where we can learn and see what our emotional or physiological responses will be. And I put a note in the chat bar there. Dr. Skip Brizzo did quite a bit of work with warfighters who came back, were affected by their traumatic stress exposures, and helping them work on the recovery. And he's also done some seminal work in that. Well, how effective is it to do it in advance? So in the heat of the moment, there's the ability to have the cognitive range to get the job done and stay safe, whether it's a war field or a firefight or a multi-casualty emergency medical event that pre-trains personnel to be in that environment. And so I'm looking forward to getting down to his lab at some point. And then to Ben's point, also on the reset, that, this is how we believe the fire started. Well, maybe not so much. And having done a couple of their experiences, looking for him to do the other ones that have been developed. Even a veteran investigator might miss how the fire started, or was there maybe more than one intentional ignition source or ignition area? So those, and then some of the work we did at Kasumnes that I hope will develop further, the 360 content of room fires, where we went from ignition to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 kilowatts a meter squared in less than 2 minutes. And that was at the floor. And so full room involvement in less than 2 minutes. And there aren't a lot of firefighters who've managed to live through that or seen it. And each time I watch that video, every single time, there's something new I've picked up. And yet gratefully, we don't get the chance to do that very often, to go on house fires. That's better for everybody. Carcinogens, the community, yet our Rolodex is only so big. So how do we improve our slide deck so we know what to do in the heat of the moment?
And it seems like with virtual reality, one thing that I want to keep highlighting is that these are not toys. These are tools that have learning objectives. So I'd love to hear from some of the technology, James and Ben, as well as Kirk, on how do we create these learning objectives to really deliver specific outcomes? Because we want to, and within that, I'd love you to talk about how can this be integrated into the training of the fire service? Because we're not replacing traditional training, but how can this supplement and complement training, and how can we actually measure different learning objectives?
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, we always start with the outcome. That's how we get to the outcome. Is we start with the outcome. What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to learn here? When person A starts this process and finishes this process, what are they coming away with? What core skills are they trying to do? What's our KPIs within that scenario? Once we have those, then we can move backwards through the scenario and design a scenario that will teach those skills. I mean, with our particular product, ours is instructor led. So one of the things that we made a decision quite early on with ours was that we don't want to replace instructors with virtual reality. What we want to do is enable instructors to have more tools and better tools to actually continue to do that. So, if you're into, for instance, one of the river fire investigation scenes, the point of it, I mean, you can certainly do it on your own, but that's not necessarily the point of it. The point of it is also that you'd have support from an instructor while you're doing that. Now, that instructor doesn't even have to be in virtual reality with you. They can actually be at a PC and talking to you either through comms or in the same room, which is something we'll talk about again in a minute with the impact of COVID and what that means for our products. But I think that's certainly the way that we've approached the VR training itself, is like, what is the outcome? And these things, they're not toys and they're not cheap. So if you start at the beginning and try to get something shiny and try to push it through like it is a toy, then you're not really going to get the outcome you want from it. So the conversation for us always has to start, where are you trying to get to? If we can know where you've got to get to, we can work our way back. And that, in some ways, that's not really a VR thing. It's more like, it's a training thing, isn't it? This is how you train. And as I say, we at River, and I know James as well, what we're trying to do is provide tools for instructors to increase the amount of value they get from their training and their time. Because, with the best will in the world, people can't spend all their time training. Firefighters have to be putting out fires. So they when they do train, we're trying to maximize the amount of time that the value they get out of the time that they're doing it.
I think that's a great point, Ben. I couldn't agree more. I guess probably as firefighters, we've been training using simulation ever since we've had fire services. We light a crib on fire. We have a burn house that is reusable. We use gas-fired props. So VR or immersive environments are just another tool for the toolbox of the instructor. We can create things that would be difficult, expensive, environmentally hazardous, physiologically hazardous for the firefighter or the instructor. And it also means we can train larger scale incidents quite easily without having to have necessarily two companies or 30, 40 firefighters involved. Really, the scalability of the technology means that we can, if you can imagine it, we can create it. And to some of the points in the comments before, we start with after action reviews, but it's about finding out what are the things that our current training doctrine is missing, and enabling that using some of this new technology. For example, we had a couple of firefighters that had to jump out of a second-story building because we found out that in that part of our state, they didn't have multi-story burn houses. They'd never experienced a multi-story fire before. And so they'd lost some of that experience in how to deal with the passage of air in the building and ventilation techniques. And basically they'd gone upstairs, the fire was downstairs, they'd ventilated, the fire had chased them up the stairs. So a number of failures, but we look at sort of those near misses or those line of duty deaths, and we're looking at creating training environments so that the next generation through can learn from those sometimes deadly mistakes, and we certainly don't want to see them on the fire ground.
And James, I've heard you say something before, and this is true to both of your points you made, where like with the flame systems, which is training a firefighter and some of the different firefighter training tactics, is the last thing a firefighter does is put water on the fire.
Yep.
Talk me through that statement and what you mean as someone would be going through a training process.
Look, I guess it's very easy, and I'm sure Kirk will tell you the same thing. It's very easy for a firefighter to see fire, put fire out. We get can get very focused on the red stuff, and for me, and that's what I'm trying to train our people, is that that's the last thing we want to do. We have the term RECCIO. I think it's used in some states in the US. So it's all about rescue, then the exposures, then the containment, then extinguish, and then overhaul. So extinguish is down the end. So we want people to do that dynamic risk assessment, the safe approach to a fire, dynamic risk assessment, understanding the risks to both them, the public, potential casualties in the environment, structural collapse, all of that sort of thing before they go and put water on the fire. And some fires, and we've got some examples of propane tank fires where they've been impinged. It might have been an accident, they're on fire, and we'll see that a lot of firefighters will put those propane tanks out. They're venting away, they're doing their job, whereas we really should be just cooling them down, preventing a blevy. Otherwise, we've got an uncontrolled gas leak. So once we sort of let people fail in that environment, we have a chat to them about what may or may not be the best, outcome. Coming back to Ben's comments about outcomes, it's about really going back to the standards, the codes, the training doctrine that an individual department has, and says, well, look, this is how you would apply it to your training doctrine. As I said, mistakes are great in these kind of environments because we learn more from our mistakes than our successes, I think.
Yeah,
Completely agreed. And I like that point of mistakes are great. And Ben, one of the other statements you made that I really liked is tricking the brain. So I kind of want to bring this to Captain Kirk, where we just talked about some of the sort of functionality and methodology behind the learning objectives, but could you give us a specific use case example of right now of how virtual reality can be used in the wake of COVID? I know COVID-19 has thrown a monkey wrench into a lot of things, but how is COVID making training harder, and how is it that VR, a hypothetical or real example of how VR can be used as a training tool in the current and future range of training?
Thanks, Kevin. And first, I want to comment on, I've been putting some links in the chat bar there to Jeff Dullen. Jeff, thanks for asking the question on, about using VR and PTSD and, how do we move the ball? Dr. Skip Rizzo at USC, I put a link to his work. I believe may have a 3D asset from Department of Homeland Security called Edge, which was a training tool for active shooter and fire involvement, a 30-story VR environment where different avatars can come together and play what might be known as a serious game between the blue forces and the red forces. And let's leverage that asset to train our firefighters in advance of an ugly call. And so to your point, Kevin, for training, most departments have enacted you can't have more than 2 people like in the same room together for training. So we've always been hands-on, pulling hose, forcing doors, doing the hard work. Well, we can't get 15, 20, 25 people together in the training tower. So we have got to think of new, innovative, iterative processes. And a few $100 video camera, 360 video camera. Thank you to the teams at the team at GoPro, or teams of teams who supported me while I was at Cosumnes Fire and support the concept of doing reasonably cost, rapid video capture and even live video streaming in 360. So like we've seen in basic 2D video conferencing, it's blown up. Well, let's do that with 360 video, and then with computer graphics, and on the way to a mixed reality firefighter. And more importantly, there's only one firefighter per 1,500 souls, roughly, on the planet. So it's the 1,500 we're trying to serve. And rather than serving them one firefighter to 1,500, let's work on education of the public. Yes, training firefighters, EMS, peacekeepers, law enforcement officers, but let's educate the public to prevent the problem in the first place. And so I don't even know how many hundreds of kindergartners that come through the firehouse while I was there. It's just an awesome experience to be there with them, teach them to crawl low under smoke quickly to get out. If you're close catching fire in a campfire, stop, drop, and roll. Lighters and matches are for grown-ups. Well, we can't have 30, 40, 50, or 80, or like one day we had 180 students come through. We can't do that today, but we can put them in VR on a phone, on split screen, in a cardboard box at home today. So to me, it's let's figure out how to do that for all different sort of smart community risk reduction modeling, because enterprise, academia, everybody's going to have to redesign the way that they've been doing business. And so James and Ben might speak to, wow, we thought VR might pick up a little, might have exploded in 2017 or 18 or a little earlier. Maybe ironically, the tragedies we're faced as on a global level right now with COVID, maybe that's an impetus to move VR forward in a way that is only empowered by that difficulty.
Ben and James, any thoughts or comments to that?
Yeah, look, I guess we're seeing certainly an uptake. We work with a lot of Air Force customers around the world. So I was talking to some in the US yesterday, and certainly our Australian Air Force are using virtual reality to train their people almost exclusively at the moment. They can't do their traditional hot fire because it requires multiple people on the fire ground. We have some pretty strict social distancing rules here in Australia. We can only have 2 people working together. So for us, that's an instructor and a student in a room with the VR system. They go through 45 minutes worth of training. They decontaminate the kit. The student goes back to their room, and they get another student. So that enables that one-on-one training to continue, effectively as if you had a full crew there. And I guess to touch on Kirk's points about community education and children and so forth, it's phenomenal to see all ages experience this kind of technology. We've gone from a 4-year-old to a 94-year-old in our systems, and I guess as a firefighter too, we want to create these environments, and what Ben's doing with the video technology and what other organisations are doing around the world, enabling them to take this technology out to the public, is hugely beneficial. We're seeing minority and non-traditional people coming into the fire service as volunteers because we give them a hose, they can feel the force, they can experience it and say, well, yeah, I can do this. I don't need to necessarily be like the firefighter that's on the calendar that I've got at home to be in the fire service. And we talked about prevention before. Probably extinguishers is a great point for that. We take our extinguisher out into the public as a fire service in VR and give a lineup of 50, 60 kids a go of firing off a fire extinguisher and trying to put out a fire and seeing what it looks like to put water onto a fat fire in VR. We don't have to burn anything. We can be in a tent out in the park quite easily using this kind of technology repeatably.
Yeah, I mean, for us, so one of our aims right at the beginning of starting this is one of the things we realized at the beginning was that VR is, as amazing as it is, can be quite isolating. So because you're in a different world, you could be in a room with 50 people, but you can't see those people and you can't see what's going on. So one of the things that we did first of all was try, as I said earlier, try to keep the instructor within that experience. But we've been up to now aiming for almost like classroom experiences in VR. I mean, one of our products sells you can have 45 people in a room with headsets on, with somebody at the front of the room instructing them and controlling what they see. And of course, there's COVID, and as it shapes out, and whatever the world's going to be like after this, it certainly isn't going to be the same. Has put the pressure on some of our products, obviously, because we can't put everybody in the same room anymore. We're looking to just try to shift our products to be separate. What we've come to understand over the last couple of weeks is that the philosophy we had before, we can adjust that philosophy so that we can have 30, 40, 50, 100 people at home with virtual reality headsets on, and we can have a single instructor somewhere guiding them through that. In the same way this call is working. I mean, I'm sat here talking to James, who's in Australia. You guys are in the middle between us, but it's incredibly good quality and it works. And we can do that with VR too. We can link these people together. So not only can we, take the risks out of VR, we can also enable people to still have that social experience that you need in training. You do learn from other people. You learn from what you're seeing. You do learn from our training scenarios, but actually a lot of the knowledge, certainly in our products anyway, a lot of the knowledge is still coming from the instructor. And they, what we might end up thinking of as old-fashioned, where you get 40 people in secondment away from their roles and they all sit in a classroom, and whether they're doing VR or whether they're looking at a PowerPoint, that's probably a thing of the past. Not to mention that a lot of the industries are now getting to understand what it's like to work from home, and people are becoming more comfortable with the idea of remote working and remote technology. The way I see VR in all of our products and everybody who's in this field right now is enabling people to do that in a connected way, replacing that element of personal space and contact that we've been so used to, and then bringing it back by allowing people to do that within VR. I mean, for people who've never done it, it is incredibly real when there is somebody who you know, or a human being who is 3 meters away from you, or under social distancing, like a meter away from you in VR. You know, you feel like that person is there. You interact with them in the same way we're interacting here, but by having a presence, a body presence, and a you know, and a shared view of the world like we do in real life while you're doing VR, even if you're separated by thousands of miles or you're separated by thousands of meters. It just allows people to continue to learn from each other in the social way that we do, or we have done up to now.
So that was actually one of the questions from David, where he asked about how would this work for remote training, where this is a virtual conversation we're having now, but how could VR be tailored to be able to allow people in different areas to have that connected experience?
One of the benefits, if you like, of VR, the side effect of VR. So if we have, for instance, a fire investigation scene, so we've got a student, VR headset, headphones on, they're inside a container that's been burnt, or a room that's been burnt, and they're doing an investigation, and we have an instructor physically next to them, also in VR. As far as those two people are concerned, they're not really in the same real world space, even though they may be. As far as they're both concerned, from their perception, from their emotional responses, they are talking to the person in virtual reality. So currently, our products have been running where that may be in the same room, or it may be in the room next door, so that there's not too much audio interference. But in reality, it makes no difference. They could literally be, James and I could step into either one of his scenes or one of our scenes and have that training experience as if we're next door. So in a lot of ways, VR lends itself to the new world that we're finding ourselves in that it gives us a chance to replace some of that personal space that we've enjoyed, that kind of interaction we've enjoyed on a visceral level by having physical interactions. Well, it can actually replace that. I mean, nothing's as good as the real life. But you know, if you think about how society would be dealing with this right now without social media, I mean, for all its bugbears and all its nonsense that it creates in the world, that is a social interaction that people are having right now that they couldn't have had in 1990 if COVID had been, if we'd been where we are right now. And I believe that as we come out of this, VR can provide the same, maybe not the same scale, but the same sort of low level benefits to society. Not just in the training environments we're talking about, I'm talking VR in general. You know, it can have a really important role to play in bringing people back together and allowing people to share personal space and personal experiences without the risks that we're probably going to be looking at for 2 or 3 years.
I wanted to comment. Nicely done, Ben. Just this video call with 4 of us here. The chat bar, we have to copy and paste that and put together a proper paper from there. And it's not that I'm distracted, it's that I want to be as effective as possible, be part of the conversation and answer some of the questions that are going on in the chat bar about, well, who's doing work in PTSD for VR? Who's done the cognitive, load checks? Where are the papers? And there's plenty of them. I'm going to keep firing some links in there, and go to smartfirefighting.com, Kevin's website, where he's done 100 podcasts. And I'm going to keep feeding links on where you can go to research some of this. But Ben, you mentioned earlier about the carcinogens of fires, and they just smell nasty. Even now, if toasted bread bothers me a bit. I like the smell of hot toast, but I don't like the smell of burnt toast. It just doesn't. I don't like it anymore. So when are we going to get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9D? So James has got a haptic feedback jacket where you feel some heat. He's got haptic feedback for the hose, then like nozzle reaction. There's the Tesla suit. It's like a skin suit that one can wear and be inside a computer-generated environment. And when one bumps into the wall or goes to set something down on the table, like Ben does, and drops it through the digital table, that they feel the impact of, say, another avatar there. When are we going to get to digital scent where we can smell the scene? No, we're not there, but I know we're going to be there. And I'm going to let you answer that in a minute. But let me say now, I'm going to put the name Stefan Truthen from HHP Berlin has been working on intershoots like Chief Bobby Halton for FDIC. We're supposed to have 35,000 people together a few days ago in Indianapolis. Intershoots are going to be, there was supposed to be a couple 100,000 in Germany in June. Well, Stefan's been working on the VR environment for Hall 16, the Hall of Digitization and Innovation. So keep an eye out for that, because you're all invited to go there and be there in VR. So as we've done with video chats, it's gone to this whole new level. We're going to be meeting in VR, and I think relatively soon. I know, Ben, your team is already doing that. Has anybody done the scent yet successfully? The smell-o-vision?
Yes, scent is certainly possible. Yeah,
it is, and it's been done. I mean, the way I think about it, in the mid-90s, and we're all old enough on this call, apart from maybe Kev, I don't know, but we're all old enough to remember getting our first Nokia phone like this big back in the day. And mobile phones, when they first came out, they changed the world. I mean, they absolutely changed the world. When I was a kid, my mother couldn't find me for love nor money. There was absolutely no chance. And from the mid-90s onwards, parenting became a breeze because you knew where they were. I know it didn't, but the difference that made to our lives was phenomenal. And the technology that they managed to cram into this tiny little box, and they weren't that big, they were tiny. You could carry them, and they got smaller and smaller. Absolutely fundamentally changed the world. And I see VR currently, and it is amazing and it is changing the world. But we are in the 90s of VR. That's where we are right now. And look at us, 25 years later, we have a supercomputer in our pocket. We have a connection in our pocket. I can drive down a motorway or a highway at 70 miles an hour. You should never drive at 90 miles an hour, unless you're in Germany, of course. But I can drive down at the legal limit of 70 miles an hour down a highway, and my phone has got a solid connection to somebody in Canada, in Australia, wherever we are. And we've gone from there in 25 years. And every single year, the mobile phone has amazed us all. Every single year for the past 25 years, it's got incredibly better. And VR is doing the same at the same sort of pace, if not faster. So to answer Kurt's question, when is smell coming? Soon. When are these haptic feedbacks coming? Soon. When is it that actually you'll be able to wear a band on your arm that stimulates muscle tension, muscle feelings? Soon. I was at CES this year. The physical brain interface stuff that they're doing, and I'm not talking drilling holes in heads. I'm just talking bands that can go on your arms that can sense your brain waves. Those things are coming, and there are so many bright people in the world. And this is an exciting area for people to be researching in. So, yeah, it's only going to get better from here on out, and it seems to get better every 3 months, it would seem, at the moment.
And I love this discussion on some of the different things like digital scent. I'd love to hear from all of you on if you think there are certain technological gaps that are preventing VR adoption, and in general, what are the biggest barriers to getting virtual reality integrated to training programs, whether it's cost or past perceptions of training? I mean, what are some of the barriers, whether it's cultural or technological, that you see?
Can I just go? I'll go first. I know I just spoke a lot, but I do speak a lot anyway. One of the biggest barriers we've got is getting the headset on somebody. So it's almost impossible for us to describe what we sell and what we do and how proud we are of that product without getting it on their head. The minute we find that any conversation that happens pre-VR experience doesn't go nearly as well as a conversation that happens post VR experiences. One of the biggest barriers we've got is actually, firstly, people trying it and understanding the power of it. Once somebody takes that headset off for the first time, or even the 10th time, their own imagination is deciding what they can do with this. You give somebody a hammer, they work out how to hit things with it. It's the same with VR. So I think one of the biggest problems is the adoption at the moment is just getting it into society, and making sure enough people have tried it, and they tried good VR, and they tried, we're talking enterprise level VR. We're not talking a roller coaster experience that you download off off an app store. So potential clients of ours, we need them to experience it. But then the second biggest barrier at the moment, and this comes back to the mobile phone conversation I just had, is the horsepower. That's changing, but there's an IT burden at the moment, somewhat, of having VR, and I think that scares people. We've all had bad IT experiences the whole of our lives. The systems don't work, and you have somebody like me in a cupboard somewhere who fixes it, and you don't want to even talk to him because he's a nerd. But VR is changing. That we've got the Quest. People like Facebook have bought Oculus now. They are doing everything they can to make that package small and powerful, and that in and of itself removes a huge barrier to entry. If you don't have the IT burden, if you have something that is almost disposable and the power's in the software, the same as your phone, the minute you can miniaturize it down, get it battery powered, get it away from the wires and the computers, and there is still a place for super powerful computers to run VR, because some of the stuff we do, some of the simulations we do, we want that horsepower. But I think one of the most exciting things that's happened in the VR space for me in the last 2 years is the Oculus Quest is a standalone miniaturized headset that lasts for 4 hours and costs $400. That is a game changer, and we just need, as an industry, we need to let people try it. What James was talking about a minute ago, lining kids up to go through his fire extinguisher training. Those kids they get it.
James?
I think great point, Ben. And probably the other thing too is that we've got a negative perception. Everything we're talking about today wouldn't have been possible, 5-6 years ago, I'd say, Ben. Pre that, and I've been using virtual reality headsets for 20 odd years, back when they were $30,000-$40,000 a pop, just a headset. They were rubbish. You'd get out of them after 5 minutes, you'd feel sick, you'd feel like you're going to fall off your feet. Really, the technology has evolved so much, and the problem I think we have getting people into VR is that they've been to a theme park and put on a dodgy VR headset from 10 years ago, and it's made them feel crook, or that they haven't had that experience. So once VR's done right, you put people in it, and it is magic. It is immersive. They are in that environment. You put them in a bad VR experience, and that's still the case today. There's plenty of bad VR experiences around. They'll never want to see it again.
Kirk, any major barriers that you see with adopting VR within training programs within today's fire realm?
People, policies, and procedure, culture, awareness. More importantly, I think, is how do we move the ball? It's effective for most people who've tried something that's reasonably good. So let's just move the ball rather than the barriers. Let's get to how do we solve it. So a couple questions came up. What about for CPR training? Are you kidding me? Yeah, for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, basic skill sets you can shoot with. I just put up the link to the GoPro Fusion. You can edit the 360 camera on your phone. You can publish it and send it out to your family members. What if somebody in the family's having angina? They've got a heart condition. It's known. Well, how are you going to train your family? It's so easy for everybody to start getting it out to the masses. And now for James and Ben, who've been doing it for decades, then there's this whole next level, or 10 levels ahead, where it's very immersive.
I think we might have lost our friend Kurt for a little bit. Just to kind of parlay back to you, James, really quick, could you tell us about that example?
I wasn't there. In 1673, brass-coupled fire hose, still iterating the fire hose, still deciding the size and shape of the water droplets and how many GPMs, and depends on the fire load and heat release rates and so on and so forth. It's true. But I realized for all the...
Kirk is in his work trailer, and I know the Wi-Fi might be a little dodgy. I love that adjective. So he might come back, and I'll tell him to time out for a sec. But James, could you tell us an example of that you had mentioned about how the Air Force is using VR technology in this wake of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, look, it really is about getting people one-on-one training, and traditional training methods don't allow that. We need a pump operator, we need a nozzleman, you need the instructor, you need probably at least 4 or 5 people on the fire ground to make any kind of realistic hot fire training successful or work. Certainly from back when I first started, you could go and light something up pretty easily and off you'd go. But nowadays, safety officers and all that sort of stuff. And we are seeing too that certainly in our state, and I think we're starting to see this around the world, we can't use firefighting foam at all for training. So the first time some of our new firefighters will use foam is operationally. So how do we teach them to lob, roll, throw foam, bounce foam off objects to get it to where we need it? It's impossible. It really is back down to the on-the-job apprenticeship model to teach foam now using traditional methods. The benefit of virtual reality, we can use thousands and thousands of gallons of foam, push reset, as we said before, and put the next person. I was in Europe recently and I saw them fire up an aircraft incident, and it was €12,000 worth of fuel for about 30 seconds. Huge expense to burn some of these environments, and one shot. Virtual reality, we can create that 1 million times, 100 million times. Cost of electricity, cost of turning on a computer effectively. So that repeatability and the ability to put people in those experiential learning conditions is unparalleled using traditional methods, I guess.
So we got maybe 10 minutes left, and we got a couple questions. One in particular from Brent Faulkner. Brent Faulkner just came in. His question is, can you address how we can, in practical terms, reach out to the general public, and what kind of equipment would we need to maybe use VR in a community risk reduction terms? I know we've talked about CGI-based content, 360 video content. What are maybe some examples of how this can be used for not only training firefighters, but also the general public and training on public safety education, let's say?
I mean, from my point of view, if you're going for like mass experience, so you want as many people through it as you can from the lowest point of barrier that you can, 360 video is a great introduction to it. The headsets are a couple of $100s. You can create content relatively cheaply depending on what you're trying to achieve, and you can get those out. You can get out on the streets and show people those things. That, and I mean, obviously it's a very static experience, but it is incredibly immersive. The fire videos that Kirk was talking about earlier, and we have some that we've done here with the UK fire service. Nobody gets to stand inside a fire. Nobody gets to see how a fire really goes. The guys who are there looking at it are trying to do their job. They're not trying to examine it necessarily. So things like that can work really well. There's content out there for videos. And then there is the Oculus Quest I was just talking about before. I mean, it isn't a super powerful VR headset that's going to give you photorealistic environments, but I don't know how much it is in America, $400, $500, something like that. It's almost disposable. You could almost lose it. I wouldn't suggest losing it, but you could almost lose it. It's that cheap. So those kind of VR solutions are incredibly effective and at incredibly low price. So that's how I would do it. That's how we do it. That's why sometimes we sell, as I say, we sell kits of 30, 15, 30, 45 of those things, because it allows you to put a massive amount of people through the training or through whatever it is you're trying to do really quickly, and in a really immersive way.
Kev, I want to jump in real quick, and everybody who's out there, get your phone's QR reader out, and I'm going to let James respond, and then I'll put this back up. But there's a QR code that I'm going to ask you to. Can I get that tight?
You just go to the website, can't you?
I have one that I can pull out.
That'd be great if you could put it up, and then the folks can scan it with their phone's QR, and they can go for a ride inside a fire engine in 360 degrees. And it was put together with the help of engineer Brian Flynn at Casuma's Fire, to try and educate the public to pull to the right for sirens and lights. Depends on what country you're in, right? You get out of the way. It was figured in the U.S. that if we could reduce response times by a minute, we would save 10,000 lives in a year. Right? So before COVID, we lost 7,000 people a day in the country to various means, based on CDC death rates of 8 per 1,000 annually. All sorts of reasons. So we can educate the public in so many things. What's the risks in your community? What's the risk in your family? And then you can put your phone in a crappy little cardboard box. And then to these guys, long-term business models. Oh, there's just so much more we can do. So to me, like been done with video conferencing in the last few weeks, like every middle schooler in the country now is pretty much video conferencing their classes. Let's do that with VR at scale. And then the enterprise teams like Google, and this will be the last thing, are at Oculus. To Ben's point, yeah, Facebook spent, I think, $2.4 billion. And I'm thankful to Paul Merlucky before he departed Facebook, helped us get started. I met him in 2017, sent us a couple Oculus Rifts, bulky, heavy, a little slower, wired. And now in a couple of years, we already have the Quest doing so much more. So let's make it so that the big enterprise teams can take us to Thanksgiving across the country in VR and smell the stuffing of somebody else in somebody else's kitchen. Right? That's where this is going. And then let's save a life along the way.
Great point, Kurt. I think we're firefighters or in the firefighting industry. We need to be aware too that the general public doesn't really understand the risks that we're fairly common. We're a bit blasé about it. The speed at which a family home burns nowadays, 3 to 4 minutes to get out versus 17, 18 minutes, I think, are the generally accepted statistics of my parents' generation. So, fire burns through our houses much quicker. We need to get that experiential learning without giving people PTSD or stressing them out too much, but we need to educate them of the risks, and VR is a great opportunity to do that. 80% of fires in the home could probably be put out using direct attack with a fire extinguisher if people are trained how to use it, if they had a fire extinguisher. We go out into the public in some new housing estates, and I guarantee that 99% of homes don't have either a fire blanket or a fire extinguisher. I don't think that would be too unique around the world. This education campaign is critical, and VR is another tool that we can get to put people in it and say, well, here's what you would experience. Teach kids to get down low underneath smoke. I know there's some thoughts around some of the carcinogens in the carpets and so forth with that, Kirk. But, what tools can we take that are available these days off the shelf in every store? Every kid these days is using a virtual reality headset with their gaming console, or a lot of them are nowadays. Now, they're going to be coming through into the fire service. How are we training our firefighters? Traditionally, using PowerPoints or overhead projectors or something like that, it's not going to cut it going into the future. So as a technologist, as a group of firefighters, we need to be pushing this charge about how we can change the doctrine for training the public, training the firefighters, and training the politicians that really make up the decisions about what sort of technology gets into the service. We could get Kirk talking for hours and hours, I'm sure, about the future of what firefighting will look like. In the future, we'll be putting on a headset before we go into a house. We'll know the layout because we'll have a map of the environment. We'll have a virtual reality headset on in the back of the truck. We'll be going to the job. We'll have done a walkthrough through the house. So we've developed that muscle memory of where to go. All this sort of stuff will be in our future in the next 10 years.
So just for your information, this is what the cardboard headset looks like. I posted the link in there, but what's cool is you can have basic QR codes like this. If you wanted to, you could try and scan this on your phone right now to see if it would work. Just hold there for a second or two. But pretty cool example of basic cardboard, sort of a nice teaspoon entry into community risk reduction or general training of the public. So we have those available too. If you're interested, we can send you one. We were going to have them at FDIC, but there's no FDIC anymore. So we're happy to provide that to you. But to James' point, and I want to be wary, we are at an hour now. I have a couple more questions I want to answer. One comment came from Tony Davis talking about funding and getting the buy-in from top down. I think that's one of the biggest things where it's great if you got a techie or an upcoming, let's say millennial all about this. But Kirk, even from your side, being in past experience in the fire service, how do you approach buy-in to get VR adopted into a training budget when it's never been paid for or included into a budget before? That's a question for all three of you.
Oh, well, for me, it started with I have to. I had to raise my right hand and I swore to make a difference. So it was me funding my trip to San Francisco to the Game Developers Conference, and me funding my trip to Augmented World Expo. It was me funding my trip to speak at MIT. And it was me reaching out to like a Geosystems and saying, hey, would you 3D laser scan our tower? And would you convert it into building information modeling? And then Reno Lavreglio in New Zealand, hey, would you convert that into computational fluid dynamic models? And let's go inside CFDs and figure out the ethics for line of duty deaths and be inside fire models. And I've reached out to Oculus and GoPro and HTC and other teams, and lo and behold, they all said, wow, this is a great use case. So we're all in. So the Google card or the cardboard viewers, I got 450 of these donated. I want 10,000. So when there's a huge event in the community, twice a year, more than 20,000 people would get together in the communities where I was serving. Well, and they would come and visit the fire safety booth, and they do the usual stuff, which is good stuff. But wow, what if we could pass out a donated device? So, and then let's say to the training chiefs and the fire chiefs, senior chiefs, and the board of directors, this seems really effective, and we got in the business to make a difference in the community. So let's start budgeting for it. So for me, it was out of my pocket. It was donations, and well, at least we started something. Much more to do.
James, Ben?
I guess from my point of view, Caleb makes a great point in the comments. We've got to get it into the certifications. We've got to lobby people to sort of say, look, this is a technology that enables us to train, reducing our exposures. It's really the feedback we get, the people that implement it, and our early adopters are military. They're the people that have a little bit of budget that are looking at next generation training solutions. Traditionally, early adopters love it. We're getting into the fire service now. It's been hard work. Really, it takes a number of years to get into the fire service, and we've got a saying over here: it's 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. In my fire service, at least. But you've got to show enough people at all different levels of an organisation. You need to get the instructors on board, because ultimately they're the ones that can really make this tool shine, or any of these tools shine. You've got to get your public educators involved so that all of this technology makes people's lives easier. Any of this technology, if it's done right, it should be a push button turn on and make it work. You shouldn't need to be, as Ben and I are, nerds to be able to run this software. It needs to be run by any firefighter in any firehouse in any part of the world. And I think that's where Ben and River and Flame and a number of other companies are working in this space to try and make it so that it is really a commonplace, easy to use system that doesn't require a 10-year university degree to operate.
Yeah, I think from where I come from, finding an evangelist for you in a company is amazing. You will always find early adopters, people who are excited by the technology, but getting to the stakeholders, it can be somewhat difficult. for me, it comes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning. Firstly, it has to be outcome driven. You have to know why you want it. You have to know what you're measuring it against. Once you do that, then you need to be able to certify. You need to be able to say this person has done this training and they have learned this, and that is effective. You need that. And then the very last thing, and probably the most important thing, because it is an economic world, whether you are a private sector or a public sector, is what's the return on investment? It doesn't matter if it costs 50 quid, if it saves you 65, but it also doesn't matter if it costs 50 million, if it saves you 60 million. And the 60 million is a number right now, but sometimes these things are not even measured in numbers. They're measured in lives, they're measured in impact, they're measured in, future risk. But as long as you can, when you get to the point where you're trying to talk to stakeholders about why these solutions are a good idea, you need to be able to show them that it's outcome driven. There is a real reason to have this. There's a real benefit to have this. The return on investment, it's either financial or philosophical, if you like. Whatever that return on investment is, you need to be able to demonstrate. You need to be able to show that, look, you do this. This is how you measure it. What's your KPI? Your key performance indicator. If you take 100 people through this training, and they all deliver at the outcome that we wanted at the beginning, what is the value that you've got there? Whether that's in lives saved, in hours reduced of workload, whether that's stress reduced, whether that's just peace of mind for people when you're doing PTSD training. That's for me, that's what it's all about with stakeholders. It's about demonstrating return on investment, and that we are an outcome driven company, that we aren't just making pretty things, even though they are quite pretty. And if you haven't tried it, you should.
Yeah, they're excellent, Ben. Kevin, I want to speak to a couple points that they brought up, which were, the usefulness is critical. There's an article coming out in the May Fire Engineering magazine. Thank you, Chief Halton. In a few days, in print, there's I think a number of articles on technology, and I'm part of one where we had the recruits at Cosumnes Fire. I think 18, 19 recruits did live fire training. They did reading smoke training, and then they did the VR experience. And they had a questionnaire that was asked. I mean, this is not a scientific study, small cohort and all, but what's your knowledge level for fire behavior before? What is it after? And which of these did you feel that you had the greatest learning opportunity? And they were 4 out of 5. That the 360 video compliments James Mullins, credit to him for shooting that when we did the burns for NASA for their AI program, and I'll put that link in there on those. That they learned the most from that environment. Took standards, Caleb, absolutely. Somebody should make us do this. But 2 years ago, I was invited on invitational travel out of the country to meet and speak about the needs for augmented reality for first responders. And we talked about what was needed, and there was an institution that writes standards. And they said, and somebody said, well, is there a standard on that, on augmented reality? Well, no, not yet. Usually what it takes is somebody to think that we need it, and then to write an outline, and then to propose a committee, and then to chair the committee, gather the committee 4 times over a year, and so on and so forth. And so having been part of a 3-year process, to have a very small piece in one little standard, oh, goodness. Caleb, help, because yes, it should be part of the standard. In the meantime, let's move the ball, and it's more than fire. We run 1.25 million fires in the U.S. each year. There's 239 million calls for service. So let's do it for everything else too.
Well, Kirk, thank you for all you've done with that. And I want to be mindful of time here. And so I'd like to allow you all to speak one last time and kind of giving one last final thought, whether it's a comment, a question, a challenge, really anything, some sort of final message that you would all like to leave the final 50 people that we still have here and all the people that will be listening to this after the fact.
Try VR.
Try VR. I love it.
Try VR.
Simple.
Yeah. Look, I guess I'd just point out that companies like River and Flame and many others around the world are driven by your needs. Really, we look at training outcomes, we develop technologies and solutions. So we're in our own little parts of the world. We don't necessarily know all of the problems you have in training and what you need. Pick up the phone. It doesn't matter where you are. Either Ben or I will talk to you about what is and isn't out there. We may not do it ourselves, but we're pretty well connected through the industry, so we can help people out. I'd like to see that this webinar is the beginning. More than willing to share my mobile number, my cell number, my email address. Like most of the people in this room, we don't sleep very often. Ben, Kirk, Kevin. So love to hear from people that have challenges and want to look and experience and use this technology moving forward.
Muted, Kirk.
Kirk, your audio.
Thank you very much. First off, thank you, Kevin, for hosting us, to WS Darley, always great partners in the bid for the smart firefighting, and everybody who showed up and all the chats, which I'm looking forward to reading all of them. And I noticed Mike said he'd collect all the links that were posted and put something together on your smart firefighting website. Yeah, try it, and let us know how do we improve the next webinar? Where do you see the holes? Where do you see the benefit? How do we move to moving this forward from the current state? And then Ben's colleague Alex mentioned videogrammetry the other day. So we'll be stitching together scenes in 360 degrees in 3D by merging 360 video. It's right. I think Alex Harvey can probably do it today. So it's going to iterate. And there's so much fun we're going to have along the way. So thanks for having us, Kevin.
Of course, well, gentlemen, from James from Australia, Ben, the UK, Kirk, California. I really appreciate all your time today, and everyone that's still in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us. Send me comments, send me questions. We want to hear from you. What do you want to hear for the next virtual chat? We'll do more in virtual reality. We'll do some others on data, some on health and wellness, a little bit of everything. So again, to the speakers, thank you very much. Hope you all have a great morning, great afternoon, great evening. And until next time, much love.
See you later all. Stay safe.
See you all.
Bye.
Stay safe.